Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Fight forever and ever and ever and ever.
We are we on?
We are on.
Are we taping?
We are live.
We are live right here. Highspots. It is, ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes to 2 in the morning. 5 to 2 in the morning, sitting here. A crazy person has asked me to do this videotape, to which I said, okay, well, let's do it. He said, we'll do it right after the show in Lenoir, North Carolina. Great. What time do you figure that'll be? Oh, probably, I don't know, midnight or so. It's 5 minutes to 2 in the morning.
Well, I said or so.
You said or so. This is more the or so. Now, I'm going to look at you people when I can, and when this guy back here, his name is Mike, and this is Mike, talks to me, I'll look at him. So, hi, Mike.
Hello. You almost broke our record for the latest start ever for a show.
What was the latest start ever? I know you're the interviewer, but what
we were having a debate whether it was 3 or 4. I really think we started at 4.
4 a.m.
Yeah, and it was Eastern Standard Time.
And who was that?
That was Mike Awesome.
Mike Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, must have been an awesome interview.
And, yeah, it was awesome. And we were over his place, and after we got done with the interview, he said, "Oh, well, when you guys leave, I'm going to start playing Half-Life on the computer."
Oh my goodness!
So he must have different hours.
So see, what you people don't realize now, there is someone behind the camera here, and this is going to be a weird shoot interview because I'm going to be interviewing him, and you're never going to see him. So tell me how you started.
Well, the guy behind the camera's masked, so you'd never see him anyway.
That is true. He's from parts unknown.
All right.
So where do you want to start this, Mike?
Well, I want to start off by introducing Mr. Bill Apter. And everybody knows Bill Apter. Everybody says, oh, the Apter magazine guy. Yes, this is him. Probably the most important guy to wrestling for nearly 30 years.
When you mention the Apter magazines and the Apter mags, people always called them the Apter mags, and only because I was the front man. I was the guy on TV, etc. But that tag of Apter mags, very few people know this, was given to me by Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer. He started to call them the Apter mags, and then it caught on, and people have since then, back in the early 70s, called them the Apter mags.
Now, when would Dave Meltzer need to reference the Apter mags?
Dave Meltzer would make a comment on something that might have been written in the Apter mags, whether he liked it or didn't like it, and he would call it the Apter mags. That's how it came about.
Now, you promised me this interview would be all over the place. So
all over the place.
I don't know if I should save the Dave Meltzer question for later or if I should just ask it to you now. Like what?
Well, the Dave Meltzer question, while we're talking about Dave, ladies and gentlemen, or guys, whoever's watching this, I don't know if there are ladies watching this, but this Highspots interview is going to be totally different. We're going to jump all over the place. I have so much to talk about, but I don't know where to fit each thing in, so let's just jump around.
Okay. Well, what do you think about Dave Meltzer and the magazine that he writes?
You talking about the Wrestling Observer?
The newsletter, yes.
The newsletter. Dave Meltzer's wrestling newsletter was groundbreaking because it broke kayfabe. And for you people who don't know what that means, it broke the secrecy of what went on in the wrestling business behind closed doors, etc. And if you spoke to Dave Meltzer, if you worked for a wrestling office and you spoke to Dave Meltzer or you acknowledged him in any way, you were in big trouble. So Dave Meltzer, I actually called Dave Meltzer first because I had a problem with him calling the magazine the Apter mags. That was probably in the mid to late 70s, and I called him, and I had never spoken to him. I had read the Observer many times, shocked that he was revealing what was going on. And I said to Dave, Dave, you know, I may be the face of the magazines out there, but it's not just me. There's an entire team of people that put the magazines out there, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't call them the Apter mags. But he went on, kept calling them the Apter mags.
Well, if it's any consolation, we asked him to put things on his website that he's normally supposed to promote for us, and he ignores us too. So,
well, he didn't ignore me. He
Well,
just
he
said this
ignored
is
your
what he was
wishes.
going to. Yeah, and Dave and I always got along great. I always liked him. He's a great guy. But if anybody found out back then that I talked to Dave Meltzer, it would have been, hey, don't talk to Bill Apter. But now, everybody knows everything. So, and yes, it's still because of Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller and other sheet writers. And I used to be outraged by the sheets in a lot of ways because I always protected the business. And I still do in a lot of ways. I'm not totally 100,000%. This is what wrestling is. It's fake. It's this. It's that. I still feel an obligation to the business to sometimes still cover it up and go along with whatever the storyline might be. But that's not too often anymore. Okay, Mike, let's move on to another subject.
Well,
but this time you pick the subject.
I want you to answer one more question because you've interviewed everybody and everybody knows
my teeth are dry. This is why I'm doing
the credibility that you have among the wrestlers from the past 30 years. When you talk with any of those guys?
Actually, can I correct you?
Sure.
We're taping this in November 2004. Sorry. October 2004 was my 36th year in this business.
All right, 36 years.
36 now.
You still have a ways to go to catch Jimmy Valiant, by the way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
But did any of your subjects, did they ever talk to you and disparage maybe what the sheet writers were doing compared to what you were doing? Because obviously you gave these wrestlers a lot more publicity that was beneficial to them by being in nationwide magazines where...
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you were writing and photographing for a nationwide magazine, and obviously it'd be a great benefit to any of those guys
Absolutely.
To be on a cover.
Sure.
Or anywhere in the magazine itself.
Right.
Whereas usually when someone like Meltzer or Keller would write about these guys, they didn't really speak... They're not flattering. Usually.
They weren't complimentary toward them. Okay.
Like Hulk Hogan might have been the worst wrestler in the history of this business if you ask Dave Meltzer.
Right. Okay. So your question being...
Well, did any of these subjects that you interviewed, or any of the wrestlers that you meet, did they express any of their opinions for some of these other journalists?
Oh, regarding the sheets,
right?
They did, but we never printed that stuff because to us the sheets didn't exist. It wasn't there, and any wrestler who was in our magazine, it would have been against the best interests of everyone to do a knock story on someone unless there was something that was, like really, really true. And a lot of times we worked with wrestlers to come up with storylines that even knocked the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. Has so-and-so run out of steam? This type of thing. Many times we would work with a wrestler on that, and sometimes the negative stories got a better response than the positive stories.
Sure. What was the first wrestling magazine you ever picked up?
The first wrestling magazine I ever picked up, that's a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Back in the early 60s was the first issue of Wrestling Review. And it was put out by Stanley Weston, who became my mentor. And it was a great magazine. I was at Sunnyside Garden in Queens, New York. My dad and I were going into the arena. And there it was, 50 cents. And I begged my father to please, he said you could have that or a program. I got both of them out of him. Program was only 15 cents. And it was, the magazines on the program were sold by an elderly gentleman by the name of Joe Dalal. I can't believe I even remember this. And I got Wrestling Review, and on the cover was Jerry and Eddie Graham, the Graham brothers. And it was such a classy magazine. It was color. It was slick. It was actually similar to what WOW magazine became, but this was back in the early 60s.
When that color printing must have cost them a fortune.
It probably did. I don't know. I know I helped pay for it because I bought every issue of Wrestling Review. What a great magazine. And it had a flavor of legitimacy toward it. I didn't question wrestling when I first started watching it. Neither did most of my friends. My grandparents did. Oh, that's fake. How could you watch this? No, it's not, Grandma and Grandpa. And there'd be stories in that magazine like wrestling needs a real world champion, or Antonino's plan to prevent war, and where he would go in the ring against Russia's top wrestler to settle the Cold War between America and Russia, even though he was from Argentina, so now it doesn't make any sense. But that left an impression on me, and such an impression that during school, I started producing my own newsletter magazine, and it wasn't something that exposed wrestling. It wasn't like an Observer or a Torch. It was wrestling news, and I had 10 customers, and on a typewriter I typed the same thing up 10 times, and each one of them had a different cover to it. There was a machine outside Sunnyside Garden where for 5 cents you could put in a nickel, press the thing in, pull it out, and a wrestling postcard would come out. So one issue I'd have a customer get one with Antonino Rocca on the cover. The other guy would get the same magazine but with Primo Carnera on the cover. Somebody else would get one with Gene Stanley on the cover. So that was actually my first produced wrestling magazine as well. It was called Wrestling Stars.
You mentioned your father took you to the arena.
Yes.
When you was that something that you and your father did regularly, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I want to back up though. Wrestling Review, though, I think the first issue was earlier than '63. I think it was in the late '50s. I'm not 100% sure at this point. So the mind's going. I'm over 50.
Bill, you're aging yourself if we're back up to the '50s.
That's all right. I don't mind. My dad was a big sports fan. I was a big wrestling fan growing up, and you had to be 13 and over to get into wrestling shows in New York City. My dad knew someone at the New York State Athletic Commission, and I was only 12, maybe 11 years old at that point, and this guy used to sneak us in the back door, and I'd go in there, and I sat with my dad. Yeah, we went to wrestling. We went to the old Madison Square Garden, and it was at Sunnyside Garden back in the late 50s, early 60s, that I used to take a little Instamatic camera with me, and from like the 5th to 6th row, I'd shoot pictures of the wrestlers. And then we took 8mm movies there and at Madison Square Garden, where I used to get snuck into. And I still have somewhere in my basement these great 8mm movies from the balcony of the old Madison Square Garden on 50th Street and 8th Avenue of Buddy Rogers and Cowboy Bob Orton. Not Cowboy Bob Orton, I'm sorry. The Big O Bob Orton. Johnny Valentine, Cowboy Bob Ellis, the original Crusher. It's probably worth a lot of money now. I've got to go down to my basement to find it. But yeah, my dad and I really enjoyed that. And in his last few years of life, he and my mother moved down to Florida, to West Palm Beach, to Century Village, where all good Jewish parents retire to. And when they moved down there, I felt bad that he and I weren't going to wrestling, so I called Eddie Graham, and I said, my dad's moving down to Florida. Can he get into West Palm Beach every week? Eddie said, fine. Every week at West Palm Beach Auditorium on Monday nights, my dad would sit at the timekeeper's table and ring the bell. He never got paid for it. Everybody thought he was a commissioner. He wore a yellow suit jacket, yellow shirt, green tie, white pants, and tennis sneakers. And the wrestlers would come through there on Mondays and say, hey, I saw Bill in New York last week. We had like a little wrestling gossip chain going. But I'd give the wrestlers messages in New York or stuff to bring down to my father the following Monday in West Palm Beach. So it was great.
Tell us a little bit about Stanley Weston.
Wow,
your first
Stanley Weston.
job.
Yeah, Stanley Weston was my mentor. What happened was I had written a story for Stanley Weston had sold Wrestling Review, and I was busy in New York trying to get into show business and radio and TV, anything I could, and wrestling was always on my mind. You were going to say something.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you weren't going to say something. Okay. And I sent some pictures. I was doing, well, I have to back up now, okay? Remember I said we'd be all over the place. I was buying time on a New York radio station, WHBI 105.9 FM. And I used to do celebrity interviews. Anyone who would come to the Westbury Music Fair in Westbury, Long Island, I would call up their agent, get an interview like with Bill Cosby or Moms Mabley or Norm Crosby and get them on the show. So one time I called for wrestling tickets, and I spoke to a gentleman at Sunnyside Garden. His name was Mike Rosenberg, and his associate, Oscar Keneal. Oscar was from Argentina, and nobody could ever understand him. You'd say, Mr. Keneal, you go, you thought everything was the word yes. Anyway, Oscar told me he can get me tickets to come into Sunnyside Garden and interview the wrestlers for my radio show. So I went ahead and did that, and met Bruno Sammartino in person for the first time, etc. I took pictures there. My dad took pictures of me interviewing wrestlers at that point, and I sent them into Wrestling Review. And no, let me back up. It wasn't Stanley Weston at that point. This was Wrestling Review was owned by Lou Eskin at that point, and I sent pictures in to Lou Eskin, and he said he was going to publish my story. I liked your pictures, send me a story. It was the Mongols and Tony Angelo, and he published it. And I never got paid for the story. He kept promising me I'd get paid $25 for the story. I never got it. So I went down to the newsstand, and I wasn't really in love with Wrestling Review anymore. It had changed a lot since Weston had sold it to Lou Eskin. So I saw this real bloody cover of a magazine called The Wrestler with, I think it was Bobby Heenan was on the cover. And, oh, my God, Bobby, what happened to your face was the headline. And I opened it up, and it said Stanley Weston was the publisher. So I sent some more pictures in to Stanley Weston, and I got a letter back from him asking, how did I get those pictures? How did I get into the dressing room, etc.? And I said, well, I have this radio show, etc., that I'm spending my own money buying time for. And he wrote me another letter. There was no internet back then, kiddies. Sent me another letter, couldn't even instant message me back then, and said, I'd like to meet you in New York at the Men's Grill at the Biltmore Hotel. Didn't know what he wanted, but got on a train a week later, and he told me that he was looking for someone who loved wrestling, had access, and would like to maybe work for him. And I was like, wow, this would be a dream come true. So I did that. I started working. His office was in his house in Rockville Center, New York. And I started working for him 3 days a week, developing pictures in his darkroom, in his basement, calling wrestlers and introducing myself, and writing news stories. And that put the key in the ignition, and we went from there. And here I am 36 years later.
How receptive...
was that confusing, by the way,
no,
with the Eskin and the Weston? Did it sound too much like a Mission Impossible?
No.
You can write to this address down here, if you can put an address there, if it's confusing, and I will unconfuse you.
You broke ground here in terms of wrestling journalism and getting into the locker rooms, just even with pictures and then writing your own stories.
Right.
How receptive were some of these guys as to letting you take their pictures and letting them write these stories?
Some of the guys had grudges against Stanley Weston. They didn't like that he was, quote-unquote, making up stories. Probably the person who was most aggravated, and when he found that I worked for Stanley Weston, really didn't want to do any interviews, but he had no animosity toward me at all, was Bruno Sammartino. Stanley Weston had written Bruno Sammartino's life story, which a large part of it was he took writer's license on it and made a lot of it up. And Bruno was furious. And I went back to Mr. Weston the next day after talking to Bruno, and I said, let me do this guy's real life story on audio tape. And Weston said, all right, go ahead and do it. That's the way he talked. So I went and did it, and instantly there was credibility with Bruno. Gorilla Monsoon also had an issue with Stanley Weston, who once published a picture of Gorilla with his gun collection and put a blurb on it, I'd love to kill Sammartino with these guns. Monsoon didn't really appreciate that at all because he was friends with Bruno. Enemies in wrestling, but friends on the personal side. So little by little I started clearing these stories up, bringing a tape recorder around, etc. And the guys started to trust me. And then guys would start calling Stanley Weston and asking if he would send me around to wherever they are. And my first out-of-town trip came in middle part of 1970, where Al Costello had called Mr. Weston, one of the original Fabulous Kangaroos, along with Roy Heffernan, but at that time Don Kent was the other kangaroo. And he asked Stanley if he would send me to Detroit to photograph and write about a title change. And Mr. Weston told me about this, and he says, this does not leave the office. I will never say that Al Costello called me. I will always deny it. So 2 weeks later, I was on my first wrestling trip to Detroit, and wound up going to Toronto from there, too. And people would always say, oh, that's Stanley's boy. And a lot of the guys liked him, too, by the way. He was great. And some people thought I was Stanley's son. I wasn't. But little by little, the guys kept seeing, after the stories were coming out and they were getting publicity, that, hey, Bill's one of the boys. I knew backstage when two guys were talking to walk the other way and not interrupt them. It was almost instinctive that I knew the political barriers there. And so after a while, it opened it up to, through all the years that, hey, Bill's one of the boys. And I have to say that through the years, so many of these guys just took me in like family, and not just because that I was their way to get publicity, but I was always a nice guy to these people, and vice versa.
That is pretty amazing to be in business in this business for 36 years and then not have any enemies.
I don't think I have any enemies.
You did something wrong.
I do have I do have some people who probably have animosity about some of the things that were written. And no matter what was written in the magazines, whether it was by me or someone else, I always got the thank you, Bill, or the that story sucked. Why did you say that? It was always Bill. It was the Apter magazine's blame. I was the focal point. I was the guy out in the trenches. The other guys in the office really didn't want a part of that, and I loved every minute of it. Here I was traveling around. Here I was the wrestling fan, and I was traveling around now all around the United States, and then I was getting asked to be on TV and present plaques and help people broadcast, and I started hearing in dressing rooms promoters saying, well, this is an outside guy. He's good for credibility. And back in the late 70s, I started hearing little rumblings about this guy gives us credibility because he's from an outside source.
You said Stanley Weston was your mentor.
Absolutely.
What did he teach you about publishing? Don't answer with everything.
No, I'm not. He did. I learned bits and pieces of publishing from various people in publishing. I became the wrestling guy. I was not involved in the day-to-day publishing operations with him. I was involved in going into his office and telling him what happened at wrestling last night, and who was annoyed and who wasn't annoyed, and who we should do a story on, and what the headline should be. I'd sit there with him and an editor named Steve Endy, and we'd sit there and type out headlines, etc. So I didn't learn a lot of publishing from him. Most people thought back then, A, I was a publisher, which I was not, and B, I owned a radio station, which I did not. I had a little Mickey Mouse tape recorder that I ran around with interviewing wrestlers, and people for some reason thought I owned a radio station. And if I didn't, my father must have.
Well, you're Jewish.
Yes, of course.
He must own something big.
That's it. This guy's got to own something.
Yep.
So I didn't, though. But in terms of your question about publishing, I know a lot more about the publishing business today, of course, being in it for such a long time. But I didn't want to know about publishing. I didn't want to know about printing. All I wanted to know is, where am I going next? How can I get the story? I was like a Sports Illustrated writer, photographer, just hungry for my next assignment.
How did you avoid burnout?
I never thought of burnout. It still doesn't exist. Burnout's never been a word for me.
Because usually a guy your age, if I meet him, they usually...
I'm 59 years old last 3 weeks ago.
Or 49 or 39. I always hear the same thing about how wrestling is, it's so bad now. It was so much better then. And you seem to have such a great attitude still.
It doesn't matter. I've never got the burnout.
Yeah.
The beauty of what I brought to me was the ability to change when it changes and still love it, still enjoy it. There are so many bitter people out there. Hey, Vince is doing this. It's still taking place in a ring, and it's still fun for me to try and get an interview with this guy or shoot another great photograph. I still enjoy it. I don't know what the word burnout means from this.
That's great. What went into the selection of a cover for a magazine?
In the early days, it was whoever was bleeding.
When you say early days, you mean 70s?
70s, yeah. We loved bloody covers. Stanley Weston would always say, blood and sex sells. And there was always a great bloody shot and a great looking lady on the cover. As it moved on to the 80s, a lot of distributors didn't want blood on the covers anymore. So then it became the classic action shot. Fans liked that because with my vantage point shooting on the ring, it took them closer and into the ring that way. A good portrait shot. When we first started Pro Wrestling Illustrated in 1979, we didn't want to do action shots on that. That was going to be the portrait cover. So it depended on what era it was, what made a good cover. And what else made a good cover but somebody who would sell. The business of wrestling magazines back then, and the same as it is today, is put someone on the cover who will sell the product. So regularly, we had Bruno Sammartino on the cover. We'd have Dusty Rhodes on the cover. We would have superstar Billy Graham. Whoever came to Madison Square Garden, even though there were dozens and dozens of other territories in Florida and Georgia, everywhere, it was the Garden that always got the focal point because that was the mecca of pro wrestling and where most of the sales were coming out of for the magazines.
It's almost, I remember some of the bloody covers. And if you think about putting it in context of today's society, it's really strange that you don't, but you see so much sex on the cover of magazines.
Oh, absolutely.
Now.
Sex still sells. It always will.
But it seems like sex is okay, but blood's not.
It is okay, but it depends how it's presented. So what are we driving at here?
No, it just seems curious. It's changed so much because we can put anything on the cover of a magazine sexually almost now.
Sure, and it'll sell.
Yeah, but the bloody magazine covers are
you don't
a thing
see
of the
bloody
past.
magazine covers much anymore. Mm-mm. I think a parent.
But do you think a distributor would look at that and say, "I'm not really interested in that"?
In a bloody cover?
Uh-huh.
I don't think they'd be interested in it. I think violence sells, but once there's blood and it's not a horror magazine, it's looked upon by the distributors as it's not appealing.
Sure. There were.
I'd love to try it. Get a great bloody shot of one of the guys of a Chris Benoit today and see how that sells, but I just don't think they'd do it.
Right. There were multiple when wrestling was really hot. And when you would probably say the Apter magazines were at its hottest, you had.
By the way, it's the Apter mags.
The mags, sorry.
We got to get that right.
All right, I'm sorry, Apter mags.
Thank you, Dave Meltzer.
You had multiple magazines at one time under one umbrella.
Yes.
What did you try to do to differentiate the magazines from one another?
Nothing. A lot of the times. Oh, Sports Review Wrestling had apartment wrestling in it, so that differentiated that. Pro Wrestling Illustrated became more of a Sports Illustrated type of look. Wrestler and Inside were more of the sensationalism type of magazines.
How big was apartment wrestling? Because I used to remember those the magazines and featuring some stuff on it, and I'm thinking, like, why did they put this in here?
Oh, God, that was huge.
Really?
And it pissed off so many of the promoters. It was huge. We ran it once in a magazine, in Sports Review Wrestling, I believe it was, and it took off. And it's sold. So if something sells, just like any other product, Stanley Weston said, do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And it was great because the company was making money from it, but out in the field, I was getting absolutely killed. Vince McMahon Sr. would scream at me to get that crap out of the magazines. Wrestlers were mad about it. Why are you putting porn in the magazines? And back then, I couldn't say, oh, it's to sell magazines. I wasn't comfortable with telling people that, and I just say, it's not my decision. It's, Mr. Weston's. Call him. And nobody ever did. And that stuff, in the years that it ran its course, made a lot of money for GC London Publishing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. You mentioned...
I photographed one set. People always said, did you ever get involved in apartment wrestling? I photographed one set, and there were about 9 other people up there watching me shooting this. It was really weird. Posing girls, it was nice, posing girls in bikinis in wrestling holds, and then giving the pictures to one of our writers, and here, do a story.
Wait a minute, are you saying they weren't really wrestling in the apartment?
I can't discuss that. I'm sorry.
Okay. You mentioned Vince McMahon Sr.
Yes.
You probably had more conversations or more contact with him than almost anybody that can tell us about him today, other than his son, who won't talk to me. What were your early impressions of Vince McMahon Sr.?
Whew. Oh, I thought you said do an early impression. I can't do his voice. I'm sorry. He was a very classy guy. He was always dressed beautifully, groomed beautifully. He was an executive-looking person. He was very nice to me. He did not like me at first because he had had a lot of problems with Stanley Weston, which now we have to take Vince McMahon Sr.'s story and come slightly over here to what happened between he and Stanley Weston. Weston was on Vince McMahon Sr.'s TVs taking the sleeper hold from Mark Lewin and Don Curtis back in the 50s. Weston and Vince McMahon Sr. were pretty damn close. And then, this is a story that I had heard forever, and Stanley confirmed it to me one time. Lou Thez was going to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. It was decided on by the NWA. Vince McMahon Sr. didn't want to go along with this. He called Stanley Weston and said the title was going to change hands. In Canada, Stanley, I don't want you to print this. Nobody will know. I am keeping Buddy Rogers as the champion. Weston thought about it and said, no, I'm not going to do that. So Weston published the pictures. And because of that, of all that, and several other things, Vince McMahon Sr. had to start the Worldwide Wrestling Federation with Buddy Rogers as the first champion. Okay? Instant heat with these two people now. Okay? So when I first met Vince Sr., he said, who do you work for? I said, Stanley Weston. He just... But after weeks of me keep showing up at the matches, he never kept me out of the matches. I talked to him more and more, and I said, whatever you didn't like about Stanley isn't me. Okay? I'm trying to start a whole new way of doing this thing. And he said, well, we'll see what happens. And he started letting me interview wrestlers. And then he realized that I had this small radio show in New York, and it was benefiting him. And I was giving them free publicity on the radio show. He was getting publicity in the magazines again. So we became to like each other. He started to like me more. I always liked him. The only time I had a spat with him was when Vince Jr. started going into the other territories. And I used to call his dad up and I'd say, what your son is doing here, a lot of people are getting very concerned, and he told me to mind my own business. And then I found out, and to this day I don't know how true this is, I then found out that Vince Jr. was going to magazine distributors saying, take our magazine and get rid of these other guys. They're not going to be around for a while. Again, I don't know how authentic that is. And I went to the NWA convention with all the promoters and wrestlers, and Vince Sr. came over to me to talk about something, and I said, why is your son going to the magazine distributors and telling them to stop taking our magazines? And he turned red in the face, and he looked at me, he says, you want to stay in this business, you'll shut up. And that was it. And he treated me fine after that, but that was the first and only time I ever saw a temper on that man toward me. Are we two all over the place here?
This is fine.
Okay.
We just want to have a conversation.
Okay.
I mean, we have 2 hours with you here.
Yes.
If you don't fall asleep on us.
No, I'm not going to fall asleep, and I hope these are all high spots.
No, they are all highspots.com. Okay. But I'm sure with 36 years in the business, I mean, we could probably fill up 36 tapes at least.
Probably.
So we're not going to cover everything. So whatever comes up, comes up.
Okay. As long as it's not my dinner, of course.
Well, did you have pizza tonight?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Oh,
which is a great story, by the way. At the Great American Bash one year, I had gone out with Hawk and Animal and some other friends to a Chinese restaurant. It was in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Hawk kept telling me how he doesn't like to eat before the matches. So during the Great American, during all the wrestling shows, the wrestlers would always pose for the photographers at ringside. Hawk calls me over to pose for a picture, and he goes like this, and then he goes, and he threw his Chinese food up on me. So anyway, back to your questions. That was tangent number 852.
We had talked about in the van ride from Lenore to Charlotte.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. We talked about in the van from Lenore to Charlotte?
Yes, we did. We might as well tell you, we did speak about some stories in the car coming back from Lenore, North Carolina to right here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Talked about asking you about, have you ever worked for WWF, or asked if you were ever approached to work for WWF?
Yeah, absolutely. That's most people all want to know. They always say, how come you don't work for the WWF? How come they never offered you a job? I had several windows of opportunity. The first time was when Vince McMahon was, quote-unquote, raiding the territories, and his plan was to take over pro wrestling, and he wanted to start a magazine. So he called me to be the first editor of that magazine. I had no reason at all to leave Stanley Weston at that point. I politely declined, and I suggested that he hire Les Thatcher, who was doing a Mid-Atlantic wrestling magazine at that point. That was opportunity number one. Opportunity number two came several years later, after their magazine had been successful, and one of their editors was leaving, and they called me to come up to their office and speak with them about maybe coming in there. I figured it won't hurt to ask. Go have a look-see. And I told Stanley Weston I was going to do that, too. I met with Linda McMahon, and she talked about changing the direction of their magazine, maybe going toward more of the sensationalism, etc. We had a nice chat. I went back home that night, thought about it. We never even got near a deal. I just called and I said I don't feel comfortable leaving. The next one came 12 years ago. Stanley Weston had sold his magazines to a company in Pennsylvania, Kappa Publishing, and my family and I didn't want to move to Pennsylvania. But this was it. This is what I do for a living. We're packing up, and we had sold the house. And I get home from work that day, and my wife said, "You got a call from Vince McMahon's office. He wants to talk to you." Vince McMahon wants to talk to me? Yeah. Junior. Yeah. I called him, and he said, "Did you sell your house yet?" I said, "About 7 hours ago." Why? He said, "Well, I'm coming up with an idea that I want to do a Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and you would be great for the curator of this thing. You'd be perfect. Can you be in the office tomorrow for us to talk? Wow, this sounds great. So I went. We sat down for several hours with Vince, Linda, and J.J. Dillon. J.J. Dillon kind of brokered the deal. Even though Vince called, I think J.J. put me in Vince's mind. And we sat around, and I was close to saying, yes, I want this job, when he asked me, do you want this job? And my question was, well, what do I do? I'm going to get items from various wrestlers for the Hall of Fame, maybe write some stories and do some things for the magazine on the Hall of Fame. But once that's over, what do I do? There was no idea. So I didn't feel very safe with that. Went back home. Had another meeting with them a week or two later, and J.J. Dillon told me that they would like to hire me as a consultant for the Hall of Fame. And we'll pay you X amount of dollars per month to get memorabilia from various wrestlers. Well, I said, great, it's a deal. I didn't have to move to Connecticut. I had moved to Pennsylvania. And I got them Buddy Rogers boots and several other things. And it lasted about a year and a half to 2 years, and nobody in the business knew I was doing that. So I did work for them.
Was that the only time that you were ever paid by a wrestling promotion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm revealing this for the first time. Was never paid by a wrestling promotion. I was paid for being a regular broadcaster on Pro Wrestling This Week.
The Pedicino Show.
Yes, the Joe Pedicino Show, where he used to come in with a camera crew to our offices in Long Island and bring in an entire camera crew and tape me sitting at a desk doing editorials.
How old was the footage that you used? You said it was Pro Wrestling This Week.
Yes, the TV show.
The TV show.
Right.
But and you would show footage of some of the territories of what was happening that week.
Right.
How old was the footage really backdated? Because we couldn't question it because
it was just a week or two.
So it was.
It was very
legit.
current.
Okay.
Yes. Definitely current.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I guess other than Vince, we could probably. Pull
people still, to this day, talk to me about that show and wanting to know why nobody's doing that show anymore. And the reason is there's no way to air it. There are still tons of independent promotions who would give their right arm to be on TV on a show like that, but TV stations aren't interested in it. And their first question is, well, what wrestlers have you got? Well, we got the Thunderfoot, and we got that. Do you have WWE wrestlers? No, we don't. Well, sorry, we're not interested. All right, that was another good tangent.
There's a show like that currently airing on Japanese television.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Oh, you are?
And actually, it's not Japanese television. It's in England on the Sky Channel.
No, I'm actually talking about Samurai TV. There is a show.
A Pro Wrestling This Week type of show.
It's called Occupation of the Indies.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I remember that.
Have you seen the host?
No.
It's a frog.
No, haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a frog.
No.
It's pretty interesting. I wish I could.
The frog cheaper than me, huh?
I guess so. There was a time when you were also I don't want to say working for Turner, but you were on television for Turner doing a segment on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I wasn't paid by that. Jim Crockett Promotions, once the war began with Vince McMahon and Jim Crockett Promotions, McMahon Jr. locked us out of the matches. Didn't want any competition from any magazines. We have our own magazine. We don't need you guys. Goodbye. So it was at that point that we stopped recognizing Hulk Hogan as a world champion. We made him a regional champion, and we concentrated more on the National Wrestling Alliance. Jim Crockett loved that. It's great publicity for him. So he says, well, I know you do a lot of TV. I've seen you present awards on TV, Bill. I've seen you here and there, and you got a personality. Why don't you come down, and we'll give you a segment every week on our TV. And it was great, because now here was something that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a TV performer. And now I was going to get my own Pro Wrestling Illustrated segment on TBS, national TV there. And I did that for 2.5, 3 years. I was on nearly every week, unless I was preempted by something more important he had to do or a ball game. And that got the magazines out there every week.
And you were telling us what the arrangement was on the way over here. You were telling it wasn't that you were compensated, but it was actually reciprocity.
It was mutually profitable in terms of we were getting the airtime and he was getting the magazine publicity. Hi, this is Bill Apter for Diet Light Red Raspberry.
I should have put a Highspots label on that, and you could have held it up.
We could have done that.
Oh, well.
Why did diet sodas still have aftertaste, except for Diet Coke caffeine-free? Anyway.
I don't know. It's a good question. We were talking about your experience, working with Crockett.
Yes.
I don't know if we had wrapped up that subject or not.
Jim Crockett Promotions became one of my 3 home territories, the primary one, actually. There was an embracing by them and by me and the company that I represented that was like one great feeling. Jim Crockett and I just liked each other a lot. Dusty was in that office. Gene Anderson, Sandy Scott, Tony Schiavone. It was just wonderful. Their business was doing well. They were growing. And I became very friendly with everybody there. And it was just a great place to be around. I mean, some of my best days on the road were in the North Carolina and South Carolina towns, traveling with the Road Warriors, Ric Flair, Magnum TA, and so many people, and going out to dinners and meeting people's families, Ricky Steamboat, and just hanging out with all these guys. And again, they opened the door and they let me be one of the boys, whether I had my camera with me or not. It was irrelevant at that point. It was Bill. Bill's with us, that type of thing.
I remember the magazines, and I think they still do. The magazine that you used to work for, they rate the wrestlers in each promotion. Like, this is the champion, this is the number one, the number two.
Yes, we did that. Sure.
Did you get any negative feedback?
Always,
based upon how you placed people.
The one negative feedback that we got that people always bitched about was a couple of times a year we would do announcer ratings, and no matter who was number 2 through number 10, they all bitched about it. Number 1 never bitched about it. But it was always 2 through 10, or if we did, 2 through 10, we never did 5. And there were other wrestlers who were very concerned with their characters. There was, I remember one time, not angrily, but Ivan Putski would go on to me, "Bill, man, number 7, how could you do that to me? You know I'm number 1, right under the champion." A lot of guys were like that. Guys would sit in the dressing rooms reading the rankings and looking up at me and just going like, "I can't believe you did this to me."
And how much time was actually spent on the placement?
It changed a lot. Some days it was half a day. Sometimes it was the week. It depended when the deadlines were. And see, one of the bad things here was that the magazine came out a month and a half after the ratings that we wrote. So the wrestler would, at that point, be even angrier because they may have moved him up, way up by then, and he was down at number 9 or something. But yeah, most of the wrestlers back then were very sensitive to that.
Just thinking about the delay that you had mentioned, and once it actually hits the market, like, this is stories and stuff that you had been talking about that actually happened months prior to that. And
coverage of a match or
maybe
something.
Maybe a lot of people don't understand what the process is of putting the effort into a magazine and getting it out in distribution. By the time they actually see it, it's kind of out of date.
Well, it's I'll do the shorthand version of this. It's write the story or shoot the picture, edit process, art department process, pre-press process, printer process, and then out to all the distributors.
Oh, okay. Well, we're living in the day of the internet, so you just explain what happens in 6 hours.
Exactly.
What was the real delay here, though?
The real delay was the distributors getting it out, and the printing took a long time too. And you had to keep having people on the printing presses proofing the printing, etc. So yeah, a lot of times they would. Now, sometimes, rarely, we were tipped off by a lot of people where we could be proactive.
Right.
Where somebody would say, this angle is going to happen a month and a half from now, etc. But we always had a good feel collectively at the magazine of who was going to get the push, etc. I also want to add in on another side tangent here, because we were talking about Jim Crockett promotions, is that my other home territory, I called several of them really in order, was Georgia. I was on that TV in Georgia all the time, either presenting awards or interviewing wrestlers with Gordon Soley, etc. And it's just that was one of my favorite territories in the whole world as well.
And I know you've spoken.
Florida,
yeah, you've spoken highly of Gordon Soley.
Gordon Soley was great. When I first heard Gordon Soley in New York on UHF TV, Channel 47, you have that little gadget antenna where you'd have to move it so you could get the reception, and there was no cable back then. When I first heard him the first couple of times, I thought he was horrible. Florida Championship Wrestling. Hello, everyone. This is Gordon. I was used to Bill Cardell from Philadelphia, where he had, hello, everyone. This is Bill Cardell. Welcome to Philadelphia Wrestling, where anything can happen, and it usually does. Wow. Inflection. Gordon Soley, nice and flat and monotone. Not my style. Bobby Shane in the mid-'70s was killed in an airplane crash. And that precipitated me to call the Florida wrestling office and ask for Gordon Soley, because he was the voice of Championship Wrestling. And I spoke with him, and we started talking day after day. And I found that Gordon Soley is like a fine wine. Even though I don't drink wine, I've heard this from other people, that you acquire a taste for a fine wine. I acquired a taste for Gordon Soley. It took 6-7 months, but I acquired a taste. And then I was amazed when I go down to the tapings in Georgia or Florida, and he would sit there, somebody would come over, I want you to say this, and he'd just close his eyes for a sec, open his eyes up, and boom, right at the camera, and he knew everything what to say. He was amazing. And then in 1985, I was given the offer by a videotape producer by the name of John Berzicelli, who just ran for office in New Jersey recently, to sit next to Gordon and do the videotape Lords of the Ring. And it's, oh my God, sit with Gordon. This is like great. I've been on TV, but now do a real videotape with Gordon Soley and get paid for it, and this would be tremendous. And we did it. And Gordon, the night before the videotaping, was drunk out of his mind. I never thought, and I don't drink. I'm watching him the night before, drinking. And he liked a drink or two or 1,000, actually. And the next morning, we're there at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and snap the fingers. Hello, everyone. This is Gordon Soley. And I'm watching this man, and we're stopping segment after segment, and he's looking down at the script. He looks down for 10 seconds, tells him to turn the camera on, and he memorized instantly. I couldn't do it. It was amazing. I went through 20 takes. And then little by little through the years, I kept watching him and getting tips from him, and that brought me to an acceptable TV look. Not great. I said acceptable.
You mentioned the Lords of the Ring video series, and were you also on the Ring Masters?
Ring Masters, Great American Bash. That was the second. That was the second one. Mm-hmm. Vestron Video put that stuff out, and they didn't know what to do with it. It was pro wrestling's very first wrestling videotape, and we got a lot of publicity on MTV because it was a music video to Johnny and the Hand Jive, to some of the wrestling action. So it's actually the first wrestling music video was off of that too, and it's still on sale at a lot of video stores.
The Lords of the Ring is?
Lords of the Ring. Wow. You can still find it. I don't know who owns the rights to it now because Vestron Video is no longer. I do know Vince McMahon doesn't own it, though.
Not yet.
Not yet. He may get that.
He may have bought it this past
Time for another sip.
He may have bought it this past weekend. We'll have to wait and see what Dave Meltzer tells us this week.
You haven't asked me yet, so I'm volunteering.
I had. Don't say Kaufman because that was going to be my next question.
All right. First of all, it's not Kaufman. You have to. I'm from New York. It's Kaufman.
Kaufman. Okay.
But no, I'm not there yet either. Okay. Did you think that's where I was going?
No, I just didn't want you to think I left it.
A lot of people always ask me, Willie Apter, to do your imitation of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes through here at Highspots, if you will.
Oh, I had impressions as like the closer.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can do the closure now, and we'll find something else. This could be the middle sure.
Yeah, well, we're taping right now, so everybody just saw this because I'm not cutting that part out.
I know that.
But
I do a lot of wrestling imitations back.
If one hits you go ahead. But we're definitely coming back to all those impressions.
You know what? Then I'm going to hold it for the closure.
Okay.
Because then I'll know when the closure is.
Okay, well, fair enough. And
I hate closure. Yes.
In Jerry Lawler's book, he acknowledged that you had set Andy Kaufman.
Jerry Lawler said that I'm a nice, short Jewish kid with a great sense of humor. The Andy Kaufman thing was great. What a fabulous ride that was. It gave Jerry Lawler the biggest angle of his life. It gave me personal satisfaction and some other things I'll tell you about too. Andy Kaufman used to come to Madison Square Garden to see the matches. He was a huge wrestling fan. And he'd hang out backstage, and he was hanging around with Fred Blassie and Lou Albano and the Grand Wizard of Wrestling and Kurt Hennig and Eddie Gilbert, and everybody wanted their picture taken. And I became friendly with him through that. And he used to tell me that his hero was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. He would walk around the back of the garden strutting like Buddy Rogers and going like this. Buddy Rogers always had the brains going for him. You know, these brains, not just brawn. And he used to come to my apartment in Queens, New York by subway. People would say, look, that's the guy from Taxi on the subway. Well, at that point in my life, I was living with a lady wrestler. I had gone through a divorce, and there was a lady wrestler wrestling for some small promotions in New York. Her name was Susan Sexton from Australia.
Wait, that's not the same Susan Sexton that was on 14 straight covers, was it?
Actually, yes. No, 14 crooked covers, actually. Okay. Not straight covers. So every word out of her mouth was usually a curse word. It was effing this and effing that, etc. And Andy Kaufman come to the apartment, and Suzanne, some people called her Susan Sexton, she rented the bed. We split the rent, okay? I'm here now to tell you she had a great body. I was very sexually attracted to her, but she would have killed me if I touched her, okay? So she rented the bedroom, and I used to pull out bed in the living room. But we had a common area in the living room. And she also, by the way, while we're on tape here, not only was I sexually attracted to her, but the main thing was she became the closest person in the world to me. I had just gone through a divorce, and she helped save my life. The sexual thing was way on the other side. She became my psychologist. Well, Andy Kaufman would come over, and we'd all be in our common area, and he'd sit there talking about Buddy Rogers, and she'd sit there, and she'd go, can't you talk about any fucking other thing than wrestling and Buddy Rogers? And it'd be like, so after about 3 or 4 visits, one night I got an idea. I said, Andy, you do this Elvis imitation. You do, and it gets some people like it, some people don't like it. I said, I know this guy in Memphis runs a promotion. His name is Jerry Lawler. He said, I heard of Jerry Lawler. I said, because he read the magazine, so he knew who Jerry Lawler was. So I said, Vince McMahon Sr. will not let you do what you want to do. Get in the ring. It wasn't up to speed. The promotion wasn't up to entertainment at that point. It was still wrestling. Let's call this guy Jerry Lawler. Does a lot of gimmicks. Maybe he'll want to do something with you. So 1 o'clock in the morning comes, call Jerry Lawler. Jerry, yeah, Bill, what's going on? You calling late? Says, I'm sitting here in my apartment with Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman? The guy from Taxi? Yeah, he's at your apartment. Yeah, hang on. Put the two of them on the phone. Hung up the phone. Andy Kaufman says he's interested. I said, that's great. Kaufman took a taxi home to his New York apartment, called me the next day, said he's on his way down to Memphis, Tennessee. Fantastic. Within 3 to 4 days, Lawler was calling me saying, this is great. We're going to do something with this guy. And I hate to use a cliche, but the rest is history. It was one of the greatest high-profile feuds that transcended pro wrestling. And Jerry Lawler, bless his heart, he said to me, can I give you something for this? I said, and then I said, my daughter's bat mitzvah is coming up in a year or two after that. I said, you're an artist. Can you do me a favor and draw? Her theme is going to be, her name is Haley, and her theme is going to be Planet Haleywood. And she likes Lucille Ball and chocolate and Winnie the Pooh. And he went and created 4 huge posters of an image of her with all her heroes, which was wonderful. And then he sent us a $500, my wife and I, a $500 check. I said, what's this for? He said, well, when you guys got married, I couldn't give you a gift or anything. It just didn't seem right. People would have thought I was paying you off, but you gave this angle to me. I want you to take this $500. It's a wedding gift. It's years late. It's a wedding gift. You said to somebody you needed $500 to put down on a new car. Use this for that. I also helped get him booked on the David Letterman show, he and Andy Kaufman. So it was a fabulous time. And not too long after that feud ran its course, Andy Kaufman became sick, and I never really heard from him again. He didn't really want to talk to a lot of people. And it was a great moment. And everybody in wrestling still remembers it. Everybody around the world remembers it because Comedy Central is still showing it. Mm-hmm. So, very proud of that one.
Jerry Lawler, I've always thought he was one of the, if you want to use this word, one of the geniuses of this business.
Absolutely. Creative talent. That's what he is. Another thing that I did regarding a big angle, and Hulk Hogan remembers this now because I reminded him. I got a call one day from Sylvester Stallone's office. We're looking for this kind of type of a person to play this character Thunderlips in Rocky III. Do you know anybody? What kind of type? Blondish hair, muscular, big guy with dwarf Stallone. Yeah. I had 2 people, and I'm going to send you pictures. Couldn't scan them. There was no internet back then. I sent them a picture of superstar Billy Graham, and I sent them a picture of Hulk Hogan. They called me back 2 days later. We want to get in touch with Hulk Hogan. The magazines at that point were banned from Madison Square Garden. I was very good friends still with a lot of people backstage, and I called Arnold Skolin, one of the agents who was Bruno's manager as well, and I said, can you please get a message to Hulk Hogan to call Sylvester Stallone's office? Here's the number. He gave it to Hogan. Hogan thought it was a joke because Stallone's office called me that they never heard from him. So several other people called me to say, was this thing, Hogan thinks it's a joke. And I said, it's not a joke. And I called Hogan's mother. And I said, you got to get in touch with him and tell him this is not a joke. And that led to him meeting with those people and him eventually getting the job. Now, a lot of people take credit for that, but Hulk Hogan's mother will always point to me for that, and as a thank you gift, she made sure I got copies of every one of the slides from that movie with Hulk and Sylvester Stallone.
Oh.
So,
why do you think they didn't pick Billy Graham?
I don't know. No idea. They liked the Hogan look. Could have been the pictures that I sent. I have no idea. They just liked Hulk.
Did you have a particular wrestler that you'd say was your favorite one to shoot, to cover?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mil Mascaras. And I showed you earlier, and if you give me a minute, I can go into my bag. And I have 2 original Mil Mascaras masks that he gave me, that he wore during his career. He was... Now, I'm not talking about we're not talking about somebody to interview. We're talking about photographically and watching someone. He had a finesse like no one else. And a lot of the old-timers, veterans, are going to be very angry at me for saying that. And a lot of the guys during the years that we gave a lot of publicity to Mascaras were very angry. Hey, the guy's a prima donna. And he had a finesse about him that I've never seen any wrestler since then either do so well. Somebody would put him in a hold, he would just slip out of it and turn it into his own. It was poetry in motion. He was the first guy to really do that flying body press and made it look so beautiful. So yeah, that was the guy that I liked covering photographically more than anyone else.
The outfits he had too probably made some
great
pretty good
outfits,
pictures.
great color. There was a purple outfit he wore that we ran on a cover in the mid-'70s. And that got Vince McMahon Sr. mad at me too. One of the organizations that tried to come into New York that was Vince McMahon Sr.'s territory was Pedro Martinez's International Wrestling Federation or Alliance. I don't recall exactly what it was. And Mascaras was their champ. And I took 1 million pictures of Mascaras, and we put him on the cover because he was selling. And Vince McMahon would see me at the Garden, get that son of a bitch off the cover if you ever want to come back here again. He never threw me out, but he was so pissed off about that all the time.
Well,
just going back to the earliest story when Vince got pissed at me.
I'm going to ask you a question about pro, because I don't want to forget this part.
You have to speak up a little.
I'm sorry.
He's very far away from me. I'm not deaf.
Because the people on the that are listening to this can hear me just fine. I know they can.
Oh, I know. But I can't.
Okay. You left Pro Wrestling Illustrated to take a job offer with WOW.
Yes.
What you were very loyal to Pro Wrestling Illustrated for so many years and turned down Vince's offers. What was different about WOW's offer than some of the previous offers you'd had?
There were several factors that were there. Stanley Weston had sold the magazine to Kappa Publishing in Pennsylvania. When WOW magazine came out, I hadn't seen it the day it came out. I got a call from Taz, who I helped start in the business. I got him his very first job. Taz used to come over to my house. He lived in Massapequa, and I lived in Massapequa, and he recognized me one day in a supermarket. Hey, you Bill Apter. And he told me his father works for a vending machine company. He saw my 2 little kids. I'll bring you candy, this. And every few nights he'd come over, bring my kids candy, come down to my basement, and we'd talk about wrestling. And then he'd bring Tommy Dreamer down. These guys were unknowns at that point. And I made some calls, and I got Taz's first really big wrestling job for Mario Savoldi's International World Class Championship Wrestling, and Tony Rumble was his manager. So I'm mentioning this now because I have to go to WOW magazine. I get a call from Taz. He says, Bill, I just picked up this fucking WOW magazine. Have you seen this thing? This fucking thing kicks ass. I never see. Used to be the fucking editor of this thing. They got some internet mark as the editor of this thing. So no, I haven't seen it. Okay. I then get a call about an hour later from Paul Heyman. He says, there's a new magazine out called WOW, and they're also going to be producing ECW magazine. Do you want me to talk to them on your behalf to become their editor? I haven't even seen this magazine yet. What are you talking about? So I went out later that night to Barnes & Noble, and I saw the first issue of WOW, and I was blown away. Here was a magazine that not only was on this slick paper, and I mean it was this thick, but it had the new attitude that wrestling was going toward. It was saying what wrestling was in a lot of ways. And it bothered me. It bothered me because I didn't want people to see a glossary of wrestling terms in a magazine of words that I kept to myself because I was one of the boys. Now everybody was going to know this. I looked at it. I called Taz back. I said, I'm not interested. This thing breaks kayfabe. Don't want to do it. About 2 days later, I get a call from the WOW magazine offices from Mike Myers, not Austin Powers, Mike Myers. And he says, I heard your name around. I'm not a wrestling person, but people say you should be working for us. You know, we have somebody doing this, but we need somebody else who's around the ring and shooting pictures and doing this and doing that. I said, well, that's because I'm here at Pro Wrestling Illustrated and I'm allowed to do this. Would you fly to Chicago and listen to us? Well, listen to us. So I went home, told my wife, I said, I'm not going to leave this company. It's just paying the bills. It's a great job. I still love it. She said, well, why don't you just take a day off and fly to Chicago? They're paying for you to fly to Chicago. Take a day off. Okay. Took a day off the following week, went to Chicago, sat down with the publisher, and he offered me a nice amount of money. But it wasn't much more than I was making, not enough for me to change. So I went back home, called the next day. I said, I'm not interested. So a few days later, he calls me back and he says, I've been reading up on who you are, etc. Up the ante by another few $1,000s. Still wasn't enough. And now people are calling me off. My phone's ringing off the hook. Have you seen WOW? Have you seen WOW? Have you seen WOW? Why don't you go to WOW? Why don't you go to WOW? Why don't you go to WOW? So I kept telling people, they're not offering me enough money. That's what I said. So this got back to the guy in Chicago, and he says, listen, we'll give you a bonus. And he came up with a figure that if I sign by a certain date, I get this bonus. And I was like, I've never seen a bonus that big.
What was the bonus based upon? Was it based upon if they sold so many units?
No. No, this was going to be a signing bonus.
Just signing bonus, okay.
Signing bonus. So now I'm being romanced by a company for the first time in a long time, and it felt really good.
Yeah.
I was not making any more money at the PWI company, but it was secure. I investigated the Chicago company, H&S Media. It's a fairly new company, but they had Mary Beth's Beanie Baby magazine. They had some rock and roll titles, etc. It looked like a pretty decent company. And I was very impressed when I was in Chicago by their whole corporate look. It just seemed like, I don't know, they had this vision and they were going to go after it, and they wanted me. So I went to to one of the executives at PWI, and I said, I'm contemplating leaving. And this executive told me, he said, well, good, because I'm leaving too. I said, really? He said, yes. So why don't you will just leave together? I said, well, no, I'm not leaving for why you're leaving. Two different things. So word got back at that point to the owner's daughter that I was contemplating leaving, and she said to me, is this a money issue? And I said, well, it's money, and there's a bunch of other things. It's some personal things that I don't want to talk about that were bothering me at that point. That I don't want to talk about on tape, I'm saying. I talked to her about it, but it was just internal company policies that were bothering me. So she said, well, what if we made you this deal? And I said, well, no. She said, you've already made up your mind, haven't you? I said, yeah, pretty much made up my mind, because if I fax this thing back by 5 o'clock today, I get the signing bonus. Well, you do what you want to do. And I faxed it back. I spent another 2 to 3 weeks at PWI company. I didn't want to just pack up and leave. at all. I didn't want anybody to be mad at me. The editorial department, no one was angry at me, etc. I think anyone there would have left for the offer that I was made, and I wasn't happy with a lot of the politics at the PWI company at that point. And I left. And the first day that I got to Chicago, I was told, by the way, I wouldn't have to move, which is why I took the job. Had I had to move to Chicago, I wouldn't have done it. I didn't want to move. I'd already put my family through one move and didn't want to do it again. So I went to Chicago. Mike Myers sits me down, looks me right in the eye. He says, I don't know who the hell you are, for real, and I don't know what you can do, but I'm paying you this amount of money, and you're going to put this magazine out, and you're going to kick ass and make sales for us. You're in charge of this. You're in charge of the internet site, the freelancers, this, that, 20,000 things. And I looked at him and I said, okay, when do we start? And it was at that point that, it started going. At that time, the magazine had been run by Blake Norton, a guy who wrote for many internet sites. He was a very nice kid, etc., but that company didn't feel that he was mature enough to carry the magazine. And eventually, there were some internal problems in the company that we had to release Blake for several reasons that I'm not even sure of at this time. But he wound up going elsewhere, and I stayed with the magazine. It lasted almost 3 years, and I had a signed contract. The demise was not due to... I know you were going to ask that.
Yeah,
the demise was not due to the wrestling business, the economy, or anything. The demise was due to the company spending more money than they were making. The two owners of the company were great, Harvey Wasserman and Steve Keen. I loved them both, like fathers and brothers. But they put out a Bill Apter's Wow Extra. They were putting out more rock magazines, more teen magazines. They were putting out just so many different things, and eventually they started losing money. And then the Beanie Baby crash happened, and they couldn't sustain. That was making more money for the company than anything. And little by little, things just, hey, I'd go to a dinner and charge a meal on a company credit card with a couple of wrestlers, and the card wasn't good anymore. They ran out of money. Mm-hmm. So the company in England that was producing Wow magazine hired me to help them start another wrestling magazine. That eventually became Total Wrestling Magazine. And that ended 6 months ago because sponsor ads weren't there and people weren't buying it.
Do you think it was any problem with the direction of the magazine, or do you think that the failure of Total Wrestling had more to do with the changes in the way people are buying now wrestling magazines? It changed.
The demise was for several reasons. It was put out by a very large publishing company called Highbury House in England. The wrestling magazine was always the bastard child there, except when it was Wow, because Wow sold really well. After Wow, they didn't really know what to do with the new wrestling magazines, how to how to promote it, etc. It was like they had 200 other magazines. Wrestling magazine, and it wasn't making money. People weren't buying it because they were also going to the internet and getting news instantly. People weren't collecting magazines, and there were distribution problems. People were calling me in England that they could not find the magazine anywhere. So I think it was a combination of the internet and distribution and lack of interest by Highbury House.
Why did they not keep the same name Wow if they bought it?
PWI bought all the rights to Wow.
Okay, so okay.
And they killed it. Wow was not allowed in by WWF at that point because it was really a competitive magazine in their eyes. To me, I never bought that. It's a competition. To me, is that, it's double the publicity or triple the publicity. But then I look at it through my own eyes. If I'm Shane McMahon, who runs the magazine department, then I probably would see it through his eyes, and that would be, why do I need this competition? I have my own magazine.
Do you think the high cover prices contributed to its failure in any way?
$5.95 or so? No, I really don't.
Well, the WoW was priced a little higher than that.
No, if I remember right, it was $5.95 or $4.95. I wish I had a copy here. I don't.
We'll dig one up later. We'll have a bet on it.
All right.
Fair enough.
The bet. How many Crystal Burgers? No. White Castle for us back in East.
There you go. I do want to make sure we get some of these impressions in.
Oh, just hit away. I'm trying to think of what we haven't talked about. That there's probably so much we haven't talked about. The day that wrestling came out of the closet, when Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff and everybody said, "Hey, we're entertainment," that hurt me. Woo! Because now all these people that I told in my family and friends that wrestling's real, now all looked at me and said, "You lied, didn't you?" And I never said I lied. I always said I was protecting the business because that is what I did for a living. And I think it was counterproductive and terrible that wrestling was exposed. But the positive end of that was it made more money once it came out of the closet. So something good came out of it. I miss the days of, when everybody could believe wrestling. I've written many columns about how much I hate the smart fan who ruins it for the fan who wants to believe something, where a kid will be sitting here and a smart fan next to that kid in an arena and the kid's really into it and the smart fan will sit there and go, "Oh, I saw that. Oh, he cut him with a blade. Oh, bothers the hell out of me." Still, let people believe if they want to believe it. Don't ruin it for other people.
Talk about the show tonight, which was really a throwback show.
Yeah, it was back to the past. It was an old-time wrestling show. Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express. But now I'm not saying, hey, these guys are getting older, so this is wonderful. But the atmosphere of the whole thing was like an old-time wrestling show. And I enjoyed it. I don't hate sports entertainment. I don't dislike the WWE TV shows. I don't dislike their live events that much. There are segments of each show that I like or I hate. But I don't totally hate what's going on today.
What was because you've been covering wrestling for 36 years, what would you say as a fan, purely as a fan, what was your favorite, maybe promotion or segment of a promotion, your favorite time period that you saw on TV?
On TV?
Yeah, on TV. Like what? I don't want to restrict it to a single angle, but for me, we were talking about in the van, Smoky Mountain Wrestling's TV was really compelling for me.
I was always watching WWF TV. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where I lived. So I was exposed to that more than any other TV, so it had to be WWF.
Was there a particular time period where you just really thought it was better
the Superstar Billy Graham days. The TV, the Bruno Larry Zbyszko days. Yeah, not the current scene. But there was something more exciting, and again, maybe it was the believability back then. But yeah, I still remember Superstar Billy Graham hanging Dusty Rhodes with a bull rope on the ropes at Madison Square Garden. Can't get rid of that picture. It's a great picture.
I've seen it in the magazines, yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
You've seen all the fans. Who would you say, as a whole, have the best fans? Is it what region of the country?
Oh, you can't. You can't do that. Every region has their base of fans that either love it or hate it. It depends what's going on in the territory at the moment. Confusing question for 3:20 a.m.
Is that it? Only 3:20?
3:20. That's it. It's early yet.
We mentioned you said you had 3 home bases. You mentioned Florida, but we never talked about anything about Florida on this tape.
My parents lived in Florida, in West Palm Beach.
You got your father.
Right. Now, I used to go into Florida on Monday in West Palm and travel all the way across the state with the wrestlers for an entire week. It was great. Atlanta, too. I'd go in Friday night at the City Auditorium. There'd be a show. Then 3 hours of live TV on Saturday. Saturday afternoon, 2 hours away, another live TV for 1 hour. And then a spot show 2 or 3 hours away. And then Sunday, a morning show and an afternoon show. No, actually, an afternoon show and a nighttime show. So it was great territory. I was on the road all the time. I loved it. I've been to Japan 5 times now. That was, the Japan story.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to tell this story. Okay, I can finally tell this. Now, only here at Highspots after a drink. I've never told this story publicly, and these guys now will laugh at this story. When I was in Japan, Terry and Dory Funk were nice enough to bring me over the first time to Baba's promotion. And it was in Japan that I first learned about karaoke. Haku took me to a bar one night. And I said, what is this? He said, well, you sit in your seat and they have a music book and you sing. They put on the background track. It's great. So I sang My Way. People applauded. They liked it. So we went to another bar later that night, and they had another karaoke thing, and Haku says to me, now a couple of other wrestlers have joined in. He says, come on, get up, just sit down and sing. I said, I don't want to sit down and sing. So I got up on the bar, and I did My Way. Did this 3 or 4 times. So I get back into the dressing room in Tokyo the next night, and Terry Funk says, Apter, I hear you're a big star. He says, you've been singing. I'm going to take you out tonight. So he takes me to this restaurant where I think there's going to be karaoke, and there's like a 12-piece band there. And he tells me, he says, Apter, these people are Japanese mafia. I'm going to tell them you're a big singer from New York City, and if you don't sing, they'll cut your dick off. Do whatever you want. So I get up there, I sing My Way. I'm in the middle of the song, and all of a sudden, a lady in typical Japanese, not typical, in traditional Japanese traditional geisha outfit, comes up by the stage, takes her tongue and starts licking my ear. And I'm looking down in the audience, and there's Terry Funk and Ted DiBiase, and they're like hysterical, laughing. She starts to open my shirt, feeling my chest and everything. Now, I had just met the girl who I was going to marry 2 weeks before this. I didn't know this was going to be my wife. And I'm going like, this is very nice. I'm not married. I just met somebody, but keep doing this. And she's got her hands all over me and all this. And I'm doing my best Jerry Lewis singing My Way, etc. So after the whole thing, Terry Funk and Ted DiBiase and I are walking down the street, and this young lady has got me by the arm, and she's stroking my hair and all this. And Terry Funk looks at me and says, Apter. I said, what? It's a guy. What? Now get away from me! They set me up.
Oh, man.
They set me up. So that was one story I've never told anywhere. That was my first trip to Japan.
I could see
one
that.
of the other scary things about Japan, that was really scary, was that I didn't know. I had no idea at all that you've all seen the Godzilla movies where Godzilla's like this big and there's all the little Japanese people and Godzilla comes out on the street and the fans are running, not the fans, the people are running to get away from Godzilla. I'm by the ring shooting pictures. All of a sudden there's like what I thought was an earthquake in the arena, fans running all over the place. Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen have come out to the dressing room, and they're swinging chains, and the fans are scattered. And I was trampled, absolutely trampled. It was one of the most frightening things that ever happened to me anywhere. The next night, on the next town that we went to, I knew not to move, just stay by the ring, and they'll all pass me by. But that was a terrifying incident in Japan.
Wow. Bill, I was going back to the story about being a guy.
You're gonna?
You've admitted to us that you're not a drinker yourself.
No, I don't drink at all.
So where was the confusion?
This person was dressed like a gorgeous geisha girl. This is it. And I had no idea this was a guy.
You just gave me Andy.
Chrissy Vane, I still love you. This had nothing to do with you.
She's no guy, trust me.
I know that. Oh.
I don't trust me.
No, okay. But no, I didn't know. It turns out that the boys had pulled this joke on several people during many tours. But it looked like a woman.
Sure she did. Well, I mean, you being one of the boys and everything, in this case, you were the subject of a rib, but you've probably seen a few yourself.
No, not a lot of them.
No?
Some of them. None I can think of right off the top of my head. It's a great question, and maybe it's because of the hour, but I just can't come up with anything.
Maybe you'll think of one in our Part 2 edition of the Bill Apter
which would
story.
be great. I've still got a million other stories that I just can't remember at 3:30 in the morning here.
I want to ask you about the All About Wrestling website.
Yeah.
And tell us about those origins and how's that going?
It's going really well. I'm not doing a lot of work for that website right now. I'm on onewrestling.com doing 3 columns a week and 2 audio shows a week. One All About Wrestling when Total Wrestling stopped, 2 old friends of mine, promoter Rob Russin and another gentleman who will remain anonymous at his request, called me and said, why don't we put up a website for you? We love you. You've been a friend of ours forever. And I said, okay, I guess, let's do it. And that's how that started. The caricature on that website, www.allaboutwrestling.com, there was an artist at the Quakertown, Pennsylvania flea market who sketched that for $5. And all my family and friends loved that thing, so we used it on there.
And how I knew that you were writing for One Wrestling, and I noticed that the other site wasn't updated as much. But what prompted you to write for One Wrestling? It
was an offer that Joey Styles and Bob Ryder had made me to come over there. They had lost a lot of their main guys: Dave Shearer, Buck Woodward, Mike Johnson, etc. And that made room to bring other people on. So this was natural. I wasn't doing a magazine anymore, and credibility. Mm-hmm. I think that's been my middle name throughout these years, and a lot of people find me that if I put my stamp on something that it's more credible. So maybe that was the reason. I don't know.
Is your credibility also the reason that your name is attached to the Wrestle Reunion, or did you actually have anything to do with the planning?
Oh yes, absolutely, with the planning. I mean, the idea originally came about with Diamond Dallas Page and I talking in Hawaii one time about the old timers, and nobody gets to see these guys, and the fans are like 10 miles away from everybody, and it must have been around this same time that Rob Russin and this other person they were working on ideas also, and everything just kind of seemed to gel. So they said, if we do this, would you help us promote it? And you host it. And Paige and I talked as well, and he was going to help book some of the talent, etc. So that's how it happened. Yeah, I think this will become the WrestleMania of conventions. It's great, over 50 legends, and if this works like we think it will and hope it will, we'll take this all over the United States.
You mentioned to us in the van that you had a similar idea on a smaller scale that you presented to
the WWF many years ago. Sure, I spoke with Linda McMahon at one time about an idea with me taking some of the legends of the WWF who are home doing nothing, taking them on the road on the weekends and doing a Q&A session or a convention. I haven't heard back from them yet. That was several years ago. I do call and nag periodically. I do also, when we're talking about the McMahons, Linda's always been superb to me. Stephanie has always been superb to me. Shane, I'm not sure where he comes from. hot and cold with him. I don't know him very well. He's all business when it comes to me. Vince, I've had my highs and lows with. So I know you didn't ask, but I felt like
that's fair. If I would have known I was going to get that out of you, I would have asked it. You've done your Dusty Rhodes impression,
yes,
to do this, but you're tight with the Hulkster too. I know you must do Hulkster.
Very close with the Hulkster. I don't talk to him as often as I used to, but he knows I'm out there in the stratosphere, and I know he's there.
We'll give us.
You know something, brother? All the Hulkamaniacs, man. Is that what you were looking for?
I was going to say everything but the shirt tear.
Oh, you got it. You got it. But I like to bring back wrestlers from the past, too. One of the great characters of the past was the Grand Wizard of Wrestling. And he would look and he'd go, "Let me tell you something, Bill Apter. For years, Stan Stasiak and I had X-rays taken, spent thousands of dollars to find out if Pedro Morales had a little black heart in his chest, and he did not. It's been your pleasure to speak to me." I used to love interviewing him. And I've got, and they will be on OneWrestling.com, tons of audio interviews that I did with people like he and Bruno Sammartino and Lou Albano and wrestlers from Florida and Georgia in the 70s and 80s. I'm going to be putting those on OneWrestling.com.
For the premium subscribers.
Yes. Premium, you must subscribe to get that. And then you got Captain Lou Albano. He's got it all, brother. Ability, agility, guts, maneuverability. By the way, did you hear about the two Polak hijackers? They hijacked a submarine, and for ransom, they wanted $25,000 and 2 parachutes. That's a Captain Lou Albano joke. So if you're Polish, please don't be offended by that. Actually, rewind this and listen to it again. Yeah, I used to do a lot of the older guys. Bruno Sammartino, let me tell you something. This Hulk Hogan, if I got that man in the ring, doggone it. So I do a lot of other people, too. You got to throw some names at me.
So I could just throw them at you?
We can always try it. Pedro Morales, I am ready for any kind of action, baby.
We're not far from this one, but how about Iron Sheik?
Huh, you American video guy. That's it.
Were you in the arena when Hogan beat the Sheik?
Yes. Actually, we were talking about Florida and Gordon Soley. An altercation has taken place, and we will be right back. There you go. It's a little Gordon Soley for you.
But you were at the arena when Hogan beat.
Yes.
Could you tell that was something special there?
Oh, of course. I mean, it was the height of the wrestling explosion, and the roof almost came off Madison Square Garden that night.
Up to that point, had you felt Madison Square Garden like that before?
Several Bruno Sammartino matches, yes. Yeah, but the intensity was so huge with Hogan and Sheik, I have to actually say that topped some of the Bruno stuff.
Can you do a Ric Flair impression for us?
No, I can't really do a Ric Flair. I've got to really work into that. That'll be in part 2.
Okay, so you're going to practice it?
Absolutely. It's not even a practice. It's almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and my Ric Flair doesn't want to...
Well, we heard Flair's at his best at 4 a.m., so if you're going to do the impression...
True, but Wonderful Willie is not... Wonderful Willie, by the way, that character name, Jimmy Valiant dubbed me that. And that came from Cow. Cow is Championship Office Wrestling.
Oh, that's what we forgot. We
didn't forget it now. And that came about, somebody in the old PWI office created a cardboard belt, because every time the wrestlers would come to the office, they'd have to lay down for me. I'd put them in my 6-second figure 4. I had great matches. We had Chris Candido and Tammy Fitch. We had Taz and Tommy Dreamer wrestle me. Rob Van Dam got on top of a Xerox machine and did a flip over onto me. Yeah,
the Van Daminator.
Yes,
wow.
yeah. Dan Severn's beaten me up in the office, and I've beaten him too. So I've had some great office feuds. Sabu, Diamond Dallas Page, Scotty Riggs.
And with this belt, do you follow traditional rules, or is it more of the hardcore rules? Like,
I'm also the booker.
Yeah.
So it varies. But I've lost the Cow Championship twice by accident, but I am proud to say I still have the belt, and now the belt is a real gold belt, handcrafted by the belt maker, the premier belt maker, Reggie Parks.
I know you told me in the van ride the two people you lost it to, and Dan Severn, he's a tough guy. So if he says
the Blue Meanie was the other guy.
Yeah, well, how did he pull that one over on you? You're the promoter. What happened?
Well, one day we'll show you the tape. That's the best I can tell you.
That's pretty fair.
That's the best I can tell you.
Fair enough.
Well, I'm about ready to wrap up part one. What do you think?
I think it's fair. You got to leave us with one more impression that I didn't ask you about, though.
Which impression was that?
Your best one. Give me your best one.
My best one's not a wrestling one.
Okay, that's fair enough.
My best one is Jerry Lewis. They all know I do this. And Jerry, there's a serious Jerry who speaks like this. And then there's... Excuse me, sorry, with the wrestling, we'll be part two in another year. Goodbye.
Backstreet Alley. This is not Muhammad Ali. This is the debut of Apter's Alley, right here in Lenore, North Carolina. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring out a very special guest. My guest is here electronically. Take a look right over there at the screen. Here he is.
North Carolina, the American Dusty Rhodes is on his way. We're talking about the hottest wrestling town in the country. December the 4th, I'm going to step into that arena and bring all the electrified funk that I can do. Let me tell you another thing. Bill Apter's out. One of my long-time friends, the man that knows everything about the industry, tells it like it is. We'll say hello to him. We all going to be there. But making my debut in North Carolina, we talk about Melbury Rec Center is going to be on fire. The American Dusty Rhodes comes to Lenore on December the 4th. You don't want to miss it.
Dusty Rhodes is my guest. Ladies and gentlemen, the Midnight Express.
And what do? You put up Dusty Rhodes. This is our time. We came to Lenore, North Carolina because these people are just... What are you, nuts? We're the Midnight Express, you crazy idiots. Welcome to North Carolina's beautiful body and sweet stand. And you want to cheer the American dream? Give me a break.
First of all, where is James E. Cornette?
I know these people love to see Jimmy Cornette, the greatest manager, a guy who will go down the annals of wrestling history as the greatest manager of all time. Let's give it up for Jim Cornette right now. But to answer your question, Bill Apter, it's none of your damn business where he is.
Tonight, you two, or possibly you three, are wrestling the Rock and Roll Express. Your comments, Mr. Eden.
I just want to know, this is supposed to be the Midnight Express hour? Well, after that, you got Dusty Rhodes up there, what's up with that shit? Let me tell you something. This feud has been going on for 20 years. You hear me read the word, I'm talking to you, boy.
something. You said it's going to be 3-on-2. It's not going to be 3-on-2. All these people know I was in a horrendous motorcycle accident 3 years ago. I've got a few. I can barely walk out here. I've got fused vertebrae in my lower back. It's going to be 2-on-2. I've got a chair in here I'm going to sit in. I'm going to watch this, unbiased, and I want the best team to win. It's been built up for a long time, Morgan and Gibson. Tonight here in Lenore, North Carolina, it's going to come to a head. And I think we all know which team is the better. Let's hear it for the Midnight Express.
I say, let's rock and roll. This meeting is over. Thank you for nothing. This meeting is over, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you all for being here tonight at Apter's Alley.
Hello, everyone. Once again for Wrestle Reunion, this is Bill Apter. January 28th, 29th, and 30th at the Doubletree Hotel right near the airport in Tampa, Florida. It is Wrestle Reunion. It is someplace where you have to be. It is, baby, the home of the American Dream. Dusty Rhodes will be returning to Tampa, Florida. I had to do that.
Willie Apter, you are so good and you are so right. The bottom line, this is the biggest event in the history of our industry. In the year 2005, there will not be no bigger events as far as reunion goes. But the bottom line, I'm in a dreaded cage match with that devil himself. I'm talking about the Punk along with Mr. Kevin Sullivan. And I heard that Harley Race, no Punk, I call him Punk ass. And Harley Race in the corner and Cactus Jack as special referee and me and Mike Graham. But you know what?
Wait.
Wait a minute, I got surprised.
It's three against two.
No. I'm bringing somebody with me.
And who is that?
I can't tell you that. You tell everybody if I tell you that. I've been around you.
Wrestle Reunion, you know you got to be there. Thank you, Dream. Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter. Wrestle Reunion, January 28th, 29th, and 30th, Tampa, Florida at the Doubletree Hotel. Going to be an amazing show. 50 legends all weekend. You're going to meet all the great stars. Bruno Sammartino, superstar Billy Graham, Rocky Johnson, so many more. And, ladies and gentlemen, the man who named Bill Apter Wonderful Willie, Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man, is going to be there in his final match of his career. Where is the Boogie Woogie Man?
Woo, message, Wonderful Willie. Yeah, I'm telling my people, my brothers and sisters, don't you dare miss this one. They're going to ball the squall and climb the wall. Old time Jubilee, 6-man tag. I love 6, Wonderful Willie. I had 6 old ladies. I had 6 tacos for breakfast this morning. 6 tacos for breakfast. Yeah, I got 6 Cadillacs, baby. I got 6 Doberman pigeons. I love 6. 6. Yeah, give me some sugar. Oh, wow. Whoa.
Boogie Woogie Man will be at Wrestle Reunion. Come there, Tampa, Florida, Doubletree Hotel, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. He's going to be Boogie Woogieing.
Oh, yeah.
Woo. Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter, Tampa, Florida, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. Wrestle Reunion. One of the key matches is going to be the tag team war of all time. It will be the Rock and Roll Express and their partners, the Fantastics, 4 of the greatest tag team wrestlers in history, against the Midnight Express, Stan Lane, Dennis Condrey, beautiful Bobby Eaton, a feud that has gone all over the world. But guys, it's 3 of you against 4 of them. You guys were able to choose any partner that you wanted. And I understand now today we've been informed that James Cornette your manager, has said that he is going to be the guy. He has insisted.
That's exactly right. The greatest 8-man in tag team history. You took the words right out of my mouth, Bill Apter. 25 years in the making. This will be the first time that us three have ever been in the ring together wrestling. But besides that, on top of that, the creme de la creme, the icing on the cake, Bill Apter, will be the fact that Jim Cornette is in intensive training right now as we speak, and he will be in our corner. It will be the four of us.
But he can't wrestle, Jim Cornette.
Oh, don't kid yourself. This guy's been taking martial arts for the past 5 years. Kung Fu, karate,
with a tennis with a tennis racket
from Wimbledon. This guy is ready to go. Fantastics, rock and roll. Your days are numbered. It's been a long time we waited for this. The fans have waited for this, and I know Bobby and I know Loverboy Dennis can't wait to get down there to Tampa.
History in the making, baby. This is it, boys. It's time for this to get over with. This has been going on far, far too long. I'll tell you one thing. When we get there, it's going to be settled once and for all in Tampa, Florida. I guarantee it.
Bob Eaton?
You heard what they said.
Be there as history is made at Wrestle Reunion, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. James E. Cornette is going to be wrestling in the ring as the partner to the Midnight Express.
When you see Jim's tights, you're going to love him.
Oh, be there. Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter for Wrestle Reunion, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. Tampa, Florida, at the Doubletree Hotel near the airport. Contracts have been drawn up between Kamala, the Ugandan giant. Sir, Kamala, you can come in here now. And we're awaiting the signature of America's hero, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. As you know, Mr. Duggan and Kamala, for 20 years, they have feuded. Mr. Duggan is about to sign the contract, but Kamala, if you wrestle Hacksaw Jim Duggan, will you beat him? No, he has not signed yet. You could have another opponent possible. Thank you, sir. Wrestle Reunion, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. Be there at the Doubletree Hotel, Tampa, Florida, by the airport. I'll be there. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone, for Wrestle Reunion. This is Bill Apter, Tampa, Florida, January 28th, 29th, and 30th at the Doubletree Hotel near the Tampa airport. And what great matches, over 50 legends. Greats like Bruno Sammartino, the superstar Billy Graham, the Milk and Dream Dusty Rhodes will be there. And Playboy Buddy Rose. Now listen to this. Sensational Sherry Martel.
Yes!
I've got some paperwork here you're going to be interested in, all right? You, as you know, are signed for a 6-lady tag team match. It will be...
Victor.
Oh, let's start that again.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
I know.
Okay.
Here we go. This is going to be run. Okay. Here we go. All right.
I didn't mess it up.
There's nothing there to mess up.
I did it the way it was going.
Okay. Take 2.
Our one should be like this.
Point to my wedding ring and go and don't worry, your wife will... Start that now. Go. Just point to my wedding ring. Come on, let's get that over. Your wife won't care. On the count of 3. What are you doing?
Don't worry, your wife won't care. It's okay.
I can't take that off. Hey, everyone. This is Bill Apter. I'm standing here with Chrissy Vane and Amber O'Neill, and you two comprise the team of Blonde Blahuigenboy. Would you stop trying to take off my wedding ring?
Look,
I can't. Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter. And I'm standing here with Team Blondage, Amber O'Neill and the lovely Chrissy Vane. What makes you two better than any other divas in pro wrestling?
Bill, do you really have to ask us that question? I mean, look at us. Do you have eyes? Are those glasses not working?
No,
for you?
they're working fine. My heart's beating in a very positive way right now. Tell us why you two are better than anybody.
Bill Apter, the real deal, Amber O'Neal, and Chrissy Vane is going to show you.
It's okay, girl. Roll with it.
Actually, why don't you do a walk-in?
Oh, sure. Okay.
If you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. I love you.
Okay. Seriously.
You ready? When should I walk in, Bill?
Oh, stop. You'll feel the moment.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter, Wrestle Reunion, January 28th, 29th, and 30th, Tampa, Florida, at the Doubletree Hotel by the airport. I want to tell you something. This is one match that I am going to be at ringside. I've got to see this one for over 20 years, all over the world, from the United States, Japan, Australia, everywhere. There has always been that key battle for tag team supremacy between the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Fantastics. Right now at Wrestle Reunion, the Fantastics will be pairing up with the Rock and Roll Express. The Midnight Express, Stan Lane, Dennis Condrey, beautiful Bobby Eaton are coming in. 3 of them against 4. They could have picked any opponent, any partner rather, that they wanted. And oh, damn it, I flubbed that. I'm sorry. I said opponent. One more time.
It's all right, work through it.
Here we go.
Don't worry, it took the girls 3 times to do theirs too. Bill.
No, I'm usually one-shot Willie. All right, here we go.
What you can't do is do a shorter intro, then we'll talk and we'll go back, you know.
No, the intro is going to be twice as long now. No, it's going to be twice as long now. Okay. Wrestle Reunion, the biggest wrestling convention in history. Wait, I'm sorry, let's do that again. I thought you were talking to me. You did that so well. Start it again. Take 2.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Fight forever and ever and ever and ever.